Hello everybody, this is Foreign Office on День TV. I'm Alexandr Domrin, and you're not. Well, I need to tell you, of course, that this is a joke that I borrowed from Chevy Chase. This is one of my favorite programs on American TV, Saturday Night Live, and of course Chevy Chase was one of the actors in the very first season of Saturday Night Live. We have a very special guest today. We can speak not only about Russian TV today, but also about American TV and about many other things. And this is Tim Kirby.
Hi there.
Tim,
I'd love to talk about Chevy Chase. I remember, I think it was him in Christmas Vacation when the squirrel jumped on his face. That's like a comedy classic moment, so yeah.
Yeah, and well, he decided to leave SNL. He decided to become a real actor in Hollywood, and now he says that that was one of his biggest mistakes.
Oh, really?
In his professional life. That's true. And of course, you may remember other absolutely wonderful American actors who were actors on SNL, like John Belushi.
Yeah, well, that's another issue. But with SNL, it's a rough thing because people get that spark of fame, and then you have to go to something else. Because if you just sort of sit on SNL, eventually they'll get rid of you because they don't like to keep people for a long time, and that's bad. Or you'll get weird people who, like Gilbert Gottfried, who was on SNL for like I think 1 year, got thrown off. One of the best comedians ever, but terrible at managing his career. So he just stayed a stand-up comic, but very, very funny. If you like racial comedy, he is, wow, he really hits hard.
That's what I like about American TV. Yeah. I like black humor. I like black humor on British TV, like Monty Python's. And SNL was definitely an apolitical comedy program, at least 40 years ago when they began showing
well, yeah,
SNL.
I think some of the magic has been lost because if you go into the Tina Fey era, it's like, it's not so great anymore, you know, but what can you say?
Well, but let me introduce you to our audience. I'm absolutely sure, of course, that many people who watch our program today know you already.
Possibly.
Absolutely, absolutely. And well, that's from one of those interviews that you gave. And the title of that interview.
Well, I think it's from working at RT, also known as Russia Today, for a long time. That's probably aware, but yeah. But also from an interview, yeah.
Yeah, you were introduced as an American with a bit of Russian soul. I think that it was a really good title of your interview. And now, of course, you are definitely a sensation on Russian TV and Russian radio.
Oh, yeah. Well, sensation is a bit much. My pockets are still pretty empty. But, you know, I have a good career and a fan base that's allowed me to do a lot of things. So, yeah, things are going pretty darn well. Okay. So.
You have been living in the former Soviet Union, including Russia, in the last 10 years.
Correct.
First in Kazakhstan and now in Russia.
Yeah.
Did you have any TV or radio career before coming here?
Oh, no. I graduated from the Art Institute of Pittsburgh with a design degree, and I did a little bit of freelance design work after that. Before I went to college, I actually moved ventilation and pipe on a big truck, so I was like a truck driver, and I moved all that stuff. That was about all my work experience before that. Yeah, so yeah, nothing related to that, but I've always been a big loudmouth, so that helps.
My Russian will always be much better than my English, and sometimes it's necessary for me to check with you or with other American friends regarding exact meaning of certain words. Well, one of those words that I heard about myself is that I'm opinionated.
Opinionated, I say.
You're opinionated as well.
Well, yeah, I call myself opinionated because I am someone who, you know, their career, especially Russia Today, like that's why I don't like when people call me a journalist. I'm not a journalist because everything I do has me, my opinion, my ideas in it. That's not journalism, right? That is being an analyst because I analyze something and then give my evaluation of it, my opinion, right? So yeah, being opinionated, but also being opinionated can be one of those words where it's like, you know, it's like if you ever meet someone, maybe their old grandmother, how like in America, how their grandma, it's rather than insulting you to your face, they'll be like, oh, you're so opinionated, like, you know, that way, that kind of thing. Just like you could say, you know, if you were wearing like some sort of punk rock outfit, you know, she could say, oh, your clothing is so colorful, you know, colorful, opinionated. It's one of those kind of words where it can go either way. So especially if someone wants you to keep your mouth shut, then you're very opinionated.
First time when I heard that word regarding myself was when I began criticizing, it was many years ago, that was back in the mid-1990s, when I began criticizing the U.S. Agency for International Development and its work in Russia. And I realized that my opponents, when they run out of arguments, they start calling you opinionated. Well, don't call me opinionated. Just argue if my information is wrong. No, they don't argue. They just call you opinionated.
Well, back in, I'm not an expert on ancient Greece, but back when all the dialectics and all the, I don't know, was it the Socratic dialogue and those methods of conversation were all being studied by the ancient Greeks, they did notice that basically when you run out of ideas, it's time to just attack the person. That's sort of your last resort is essentially F you.
I remember another absolutely wonderful phrase that I heard many years ago. Being correct is not an excuse yet. So, well, from my point of view, it's not a very interesting phrase, especially for those who study English.
Yeah, being correct. That's actually one that's kind of new to me, but, in a way, yeah. Because, well, you have to also understand that with a lot of arguing, especially about politics, people are actually not motivated whatsoever really by beliefs. If human beings were completely rational, then how would elections work? Basically, candidates would write a pamphlet about what they plan to do. Someone would read the pamphlet, and that would be it. They'd make their decision based on that. But it's not. There's a tendency for the taller candidate to win. Racial questions come into play always during elections and stuff like that. Also, if we think about things, Barack Obama for his first election campaign won the award for best advertising campaign from Ad Age because the candidates are basically products. Human beings, when we buy things from stores, we don't buy them because of the quality of them. We buy them for sort of abstract reasons, like the color. Sometimes something can attract us to it. Brands like McDonald's, they have the Happy Meal for kids because that can sort of put this friendly feeling in your mind that can carry with you for those. These are all feelings and abstractions, and in actuality, that's really what sways people more so than reasoned argument, and that's why hysterics. I could call them, actually do work very well in politics, and especially like the whole team mentality of, sometimes I'm maybe too harsh on Russian liberals, maybe not harsh enough, but I can say that you're on team liberal, you're this, we're the good guys. And also that team dynamic, that tribalism in human minds is also another major factor in what makes our decisions. So regardless of what the candidate says, it's like, I don't know, this Obama guy, he looks liberal. He, especially, Obama has very kind of feminine mannerisms. So for me, even if I agreed with him, I'm like, I don't know, this guy's really feminine. Do I want to vote for him? I want someone who's like an iron pumping tough guy. But that's feelings. That's not true. What if his beliefs really lined up with me? He just happened to be sort of like, feminine. What are you going to say? So.
I remember Arnold Schwarzenegger, one of our heroes, of course, here in Russia, when he called his opponents girly men. It's an interesting phrase. Actually, you have already begun answering my next question. We have a lot of misconceptions about America here in Russia. And again, in one of your interviews, you were saying about some of those misconceptions, like in America, everyone has a big house and a good job and is rich.
And I got to say, the new number one, Russians are obsessed that Americans are deeply concerned about what happens in Russia, and the majority of people in America do not care about Russia, which I'm not saying in a bad way, like you should care, no. Why should you, the majority of Russians don't really care that much about what's happening in Africa right now.
Right.
There are people there who are suffering, who are having troubles, who have their own political conflicts. Like I just watched an interesting video about the Congo. I knew things were bad there, but I had no idea. But we don't care about that in Russia, just like the way people in Poland seem to be sort of obsessed. What is Russia going to do to us? They've got these plans. Whereas from the Russian perspective, Poland it's just some place. It's nothing to Russians. And that's how Americans really see Russia. And Russian people cannot understand that or deal with it for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Well, but some other misconceptions that you mentioned in some of your previous interviews, probably the strongest of them is that there is this kind of a thing called American dream. And you say that it's done. It doesn't exist anymore. To what extent it's done? Maybe
I overstepped my bounds a bit because you can always interpret things differently. I would say, in my personal opinion, with the American dream is what it really was it was the opportunity to do things. See, Russians, especially when they immigrate and leave Russia, they see the American dream as I will have a house, I will have a car, bought with loans, so they're not really yours, but nonetheless. And the problem is, it's this materialism that what America is the opportunity to earn money to get that house, or maybe even the opportunity to design that house, the opportunity to build it, the opportunity to build that car. Because this is a silly example, but I think it's very important, is at the beginning of a cookbook where they explained how before the French Revolution, if you had some sort of, we'll call it a restaurant for lack of a term, restaurant, you would actually have to get approval from the local authorities to choose what would be on the menu. They would say what you can serve, what you can't, and at any moment they could just rip it up. French Revolution happens, a lot of people died, unfortunately, but after that, French cuisine was born because all of a sudden no one is there. No one is telling these people how to run their restaurant or what to do, and the creativity explodes, and you sort of have a French culinary dream. And that's what America was, because these immigrants would come from countries where your father's not a general, you will never be a general. And they sort of got that freedom, that liberty, we should say liberty because that's the type of freedom it was. And for a lot of people that was great, and it was the opportunity to do new things. And I think that a lot of that opportunity has dried up. I mean, there are immigrant stories to this day, but if you look at the statistics about social mobility in America, things are not going so well. And does the average American really have that much freedom to create when the average American is so burdened by massive tons of bureaucracy? I mean, how easy is it to start a business now in America or live your dream? I think it's become very difficult, or it's maybe not as radically different than anywhere else, especially in Europe.
Our program is not 100% political.
Yeah.
It also touches upon a lot of cultural things. And my next question is, what helps you to understand Russia better? Of course, well, imagine that it's your first year in the former Soviet Union, first year in Russia. You have this wonderful opportunity to live in Russia. So you can understand Russia just because you can go to a local store to buy a pack of cigarettes.
Yeah.
But your fellow Americans, what would you recommend them? Maybe books, maybe films,
I would
maybe
say
music?
the number one thing is that you have to learn the language. Because once you learn the language, you'll be sort of on the inside. And that's true if I have a friend who also left Cleveland and he lives in Hungary, and he just said that too. Once you get to a certain level of the language, it opens this other universe. Because otherwise, when you're looking at things in English, everything's translated, or it's very, very biased, either for or usually against Russia. And so you really can't get it. You can't, it's not the same. You know, it's not the same. It's not the same. If you're an American, and I don't know, maybe you really like a song like, what would you say, the classic Stairway to Heaven. Well, if you read the text to that song, the lyrics in a translation into Russian, maybe done by Google Translate, not so great, not so interesting. And that's it. You have to learn the language. And then when you do that, I would really recommend just reading what people say online, reading what the trolls say, especially about the Ukrainian situation, the talking points, the insults.
Now, our program is not only for the English-speaking audience, but also for those Russians who speak English.
Yeah.
So my next question is, what would help us, Russians, who live in Russia, even though many of us, again, speak English, to understand America better? What books, what sources, including the internet sources, what magazines? Of course, if we go to America, where in America shall we go to feel the real America, if there is such a thing?
You'll feel it in your hands the first time you pick up an AR-15. And you understand that with a lot of Europeans, especially talk to British people, man, do they hate guns. But you have to understand that in that gun, there's a lot of things to with America. It's my gun as an individual, and it's my responsibility. And yeah, it's dangerous, but that again goes back to the mentality where I think Americans have a much more positive image of their fellow countrymen. With that, again, it is that responsibility that I'm responsible for my family. I'm not going to call the police when something goes wrong. I'm going to solve the problem myself. Because as one of my teachers said in school, maybe this is the most important thing that you should know to understand traditional America, which is sadly dying, is he said, everything that happens to you is your fault. Everything. And then the kids in the class would be like, how can that be? You know, well, what if this kid insults me? The reason he's insulting you is because you let him. And that's exactly that mentality, that very Protestant American mentality, and then you can see it in one sentence, and you can also see it when you got a gun in your hands. I would also say this is for both sides of the argument. Americans want to see Russia, Russians want to see America. So if Americans came to Russia, I'd ask them to come here and see the cultural things, see the Arbat Street and the Kremlin and all that stuff. But you should really go out in the middle of nowhere. Go out even beyond Russia. I took a vacation to Kyrgyzstan, Karakol, Kyrgyzstan, where a lot of a new building in town is like the back of a semi-truck trailer cut out. People are kind of poor there, but you see this like the massiveness of the landmass when you go over the Ural Mountains, and the people are absolutely lovely, and you can see all these old buildings. And we rented a yurt and sat by the water, and you get to know it's amazing. It's like this different feeling, right? So you want to see the cities in Russia and stuff, but you got to go to where these little places or where else, like even some little places in the Moscow Oblast where just like I have a friend who's a monk, and at the monastery, just going to the monastery, you are in this different reality, like maybe the more real Russia. And in fact, even sometimes in Kyrgyzstan, you can see more of the real Russia than you can in Moscow. And vice versa, if I were Russian, you should go to some of the white picket fence places, some farms, and talk to those people there, but you should go to the ghetto. Go to the gulliest ghetto at the worst time of night and then see how things are there. Because I'm not from a nice neighborhood, and so you have to see that side of America too. And I would say in Russia, do the same thing. Go to the best places and also try to go to the worst place you can and see what it's like.
I was very lucky because during my very first visit to America, I spent 2 months in Washington, D.C. and 2 months in Iowa.
Yeah.
And Iowa was absolutely different. And that's where
there's no homeless people.
Absolutely, yes. And of course, I also had a chance to spend half a year in Detroit,
yeah,
which was not nice.
Not so much. Although I do have a Russian friend who lives there, and she claims it's great. So I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Now, could you please tell us about your programs on Mayak? And also on RT.
Well, on RT, that's more important because it's in English. I used to do opinion pieces. Those just ended, but now I do what's called the War of Words podcast, where I try to put together RT's first podcast, and it's basically a lot of interviews like this. It's kind of this kind of format. In fact, so people would know, for foreign people, this format is very popular in Russia. Brief interview, very popular. And that's what we're trying to do. On Mayak, that's in Russian. It's the most popular talk radio show in the country. And I'm on the morning show, sort of the morning zoo. So that's not so much about politics. Of course, it comes up. But, today we had a big discussion more about the differences in gender, for example, which is always a fun topic to argue about. And, of course, there I'm sort of the third man, since it's not in English. And obviously because it's funny the way foreign people talk, I love the way that people in India talk, or the way that people in Africa talk. So basically, I'm there because I have a funny accent and I can sort of talk about other countries and stuff like that. And yeah, so it's a bit more goofy, a goofy role, whereas at RT things have to be more professional. Sadly, I'd like it to be more goofy.
And of course, now and then, both of us participate in some talk shows on different TV channels.
Yeah.
And I was really, really privileged to be your guest on Tim Kirby's
on the War of Words.
War of Words.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure.
It was our pleasure indeed, and we will be delighted, of course, to see you again. Mm-hmm. Please stay tuned, guys. That was Foreign Office.